Recording live from the engine room in Broad Ripple, this is the Voices of Indy podcast hosted by Josh Gillespie. Voices of Indy is a show dedicated to giving you the opportunity to know the musical, visual, and theatrical arts of Indianapolis, Indiana. This week's guest is comedian Stephen Vincent Giles. Today's episode is sponsored by Indianapolis Independent Entertainment. IIE LLC's goal is to help grow local DIY artists, freelancers, and businesses within Indianapolis and generate more paying creative opportunities. Their mission is simple: to establish a network of creatives who excel in areas of need and connecting them with other network members. This way they can help to expand the local art and music scenes. IIE believes that by eliminating some of the intimidating barriers within the entertainment industry, more opportunities will be produced for local freelancers and businesses. This will help Indianapolis become the place to go for arts and music in the Midwest. If you are interested in learning more, go to their website, indyent.com. That's INDYINDIEENT.com, and fill out a free application to discuss how you and IIE can redefine making it together. But now on to tonight's guest. Stephen Vincent Giles is a character actor, improviser, comedian, and storyteller who puts those talents to good use as a house performer at the White Rabbit Cabaret. In 2019, Stephen produced and directed a darkly humorous evening with Stephen Vincent Giles. In 2018, he was the announcer for the Indianapolis St. Patrick's Day Parade. In 2017, Crossroads Comedy Festival named him Best Male Stand-Up Comedian in Indianapolis. 2016 he was an original cast member of the musical Heck Above Deck. And in 2015, Stephen was a performance artist in residence at the Indianapolis Museum of Art. Finally, Stephen was a founding member of An Evening with the Authors, which is quite an entertaining event if you haven't seen it. And if you haven't seen it, you can check some of those bits out on Stephen's YouTube page. So thank you, Stephen Vincent Giles, for being on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is exciting.
It's absolutely great to have you on. For those who may not be familiar with you, and I know that I've just learned of you. I've been checking out your material. You're fantastic. I love some of the things that you do.
Thanks.
I really do. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Wow. Well, I grew up in Indianapolis on the east side. My family had always been very theatrical, involved in the arts and things like that. So I kind of grew up in a house of performers. And even like around holidays and stuff, it would be like, people would take turns doing the thing that they do to entertain the rest of the family, whether it's sing a song, play an instrument, tell a story, or whatever it is, And I just kind of grew up in that kind of a household. I just grew up in Indianapolis. I went to college. I got an education and got a degree in religion philosophy, which
that can come in handy as a comedian.
That's probably why I do comedy now. I don't. It doesn't pay the bills, but it's made me a better problem solver. Maybe.
Oh, sure.
The logic classes and things like that. Comedy is just I think comedy is just. It's just logical fallacies told in an entertaining way. And that's really what I think it kind of boils down to. But I don't look at it. I don't think about it academically. It's more of a organic process. But the logical fallacy of equivocation would be something like, coming to see my show is better than sex, because coming to see my show is better than nothing. And I think most of us would agree nothing's better than sex. Therefore, coming to see my show is better than sex.
Well,
because it's better than nothing.
It's
a
solid argument.
That's an example. So I just did various jobs around here and there, and it was actually I got laid off from a job. This was, how long ago was this? 12 years ago, maybe? 13 years ago? Huge layoffs were happening, and I was in a department, 59 of us were all laid off on one day.
Oh, my gosh.
And, and it bummed me out real bad, and so I was going around looking for things to do, like work to do. I was on unemployment and doing job interviews, and it was the end of the day, and I was tired and all raggedy, and I had my tie was undone. I had my comfortable shoes on at that point. It was a rainy day. I had a raincoat on. And I kind of just staggered into Morty's Comedy Club because I knew they did a writer's workshop, and I wanted to just kind of check it out because I kind of had a yearning to learn more about how do you become a comedian? Like, where do you go from nothing to you're on stage all of a sudden? So I wander in there. I told a story. It wasn't part of the show. People loved it. The critique I got was, "We love that outfit. That's so great." And I'm like, what? Because I was so disheveled, and my story was kind of a sad story. It was a very self-deprecating story.
Yeah.
And they're like, "Oh, it's perfect. That's a real nice character that you're playing." And I'm like, "I'm not playing a character.
I'm playing myself.
Playing myself here." But I've learned a lot since then. I mean, that was 13 years ago. And that 5-minute story is now like a 30-second joke. You know what I mean? It's like you learn how to trim the fat, and you just keep doing it.
That's fantastic. Now you also do an evening with the authors. That you started that a few years ago, but that's something that you've continued doing with, and that's at the White Rabbit Cabaret, correct?
Yeah, it's close to my heart. I can't, of course, take sole responsibility. There was a local comedian he passed away, but he initiated the whole thing. He assembled. He's kind of like our Nick Fury, and he got these
Nice.
like strange comedians. Those of us who make up like the core group of like there's like seven of us or 8 of us. We're all very different when we perform comedy. Everyone's very unique, kind of like, but together on that show, it just works. It's like the Avengers of comedy.
Yes, nice.
Yeah, and so there was a core group of us that started it, and we're still involved in it. We've lost some people here and there who've just left the show or moved, and we've grown. We've incorporated more people into the show. We have more like guest spots so that we can get fresh faces and be a little more inclusive. The producer of the show, who also produces the podcast, it's also a podcast. So,
oh, really?
It's a show / podcast, and you can look it up wherever you listen to podcasts. It's either under An Evening with the Authors or Fake Authors. Sometimes you can find it under Fake Authors. But he moved to L.A. Isaac Lanford's his name, and since he's not doing the show here in Indianapolis, he started a new one in L.A. So we have a branch out there,
nice,
which is really cool. Yeah.
Is it also on the same podcast?
Yeah, and so when he does the podcast, we record all of the shows, and then he just kind of edits them and picks the bits that he likes, and he puts them together.
Yeah. So you've been doing this for like 5-6 years now. So almost 7 years, actually, I guess.
An Evening with the Authors?
Yeah.
It's been a while. Yeah, it's been a while.
So who has been your favorite character to do? And do you redo characters?
Oh, wow. So when we first started, the idea was to just do a new thing every time.
Mm-hmm.
But, after 12 characters, at least for me, the well runs dry. There are some of us that are like cranking out new characters all the time, and
really?
I don't know how they do it. Very talented people on that show. But I only have so many. Sometimes I'll come up with an idea, and then it's fun. But I do have like a standard, like 4.
Really? Who are your standard 4?
That I kind of switch around. And so what I do is I'll rewrite pieces for them. So I'll do the same character, but a new piece. One of my favorites, absolute favorites, is Billy Joe Perrin, and he's a poet laureate of the Bayou. So everything I read, I actually write it for myself phonetically so that I can do the kind of an accent properly.
Oh, wow.
So when I type it up the way it would sound, so I can kind of practice sounding like sounding like you. The grammar is just a garbled mess. How y'all are, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Gonna told you about 3 or 40 dear poem. And so he's a poet, and I love writing in that kind of accent dialect language where I throw some Cajun French in and English, but still make it kind of rhyme and make sense. Like each poem is a sensible poem. They're not nonsense. They just sound like it. But if you listen to the words, every poem makes sense. I love him a lot. Another character I love is his name's Melvin Shellbaker. And,
yes, I actually watched a video of his wife today.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's his mother, Melba.
Yes.
So,
I watched Melba Shellbaker today because my son is into Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
And I had to watch that.
Now the reason, and it's easy to think that she would be related, that she'd be his age, because that show was actually a flashback show.
Oh, it was?
So we were doing an evening with the authors throughout the century, as if it was a show that had been around since radio.
Yes. Yeah,
So
it was taking place during the 80s.
Yeah.
And when you launch into that, like when the lights come up and you launch into the Thundercats, I mean, you had me hooked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I loved it. I was getting all the references.
Well, and one of the reasons I did that is, since it was a flashback show, the idea was that they were showing, this was done live, but they were showing clips in a way of previous decades. And so I was fortunate to get the 80s. So when they introduced me, they go, oh, back in 1980, whatever, so and so. And I thought about how those flashback shows, when they use a clip like that, they don't start at like the very, very beginning. They'll like cut right into the meat of it.
That's right, they did.
So instead of like doing a setup or saying hello, I was mid-sentence. And that's where I jumped. That's why I jumped right into it.
I appreciate that. It took me back. That's a tremendous skit. But I cut you off. You're one of your favorites is the son.
Yeah, Melvin Shellbaker. He's he's a nerdy guy. He lives with his parents and plays dungeons. He's like a professional game master. I needed a character. I needed a character quickly. The show was going to go on in like an hour or two.
Yeah.
And so I just wrote the first thing that came to my mind, because I wasn't going to do the show. Jim, who created the show, was like, come on. It was kind of pulling teeth with me early on.
Yeah.
But now I love it. It's, but I came up with the idea very quickly of the Dungeon Master's Guide to Dating. And so it was this kind of, I had this idea of like this kind of neck beard kind of, fedora wearing guy who wanted to tell you how to pick up chicks, based on his experience as a game master. And I had a lot of fun with that character. And then I would do, I went to events and I would play that character at live events.
Really?
And mingle in the audience, or like when people were waiting like in a lobby, and entertain as that character. But I think many people thought I was a real person, like this was a real person who was on the spectrum or something.
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't make eye contact with the people I was speaking directly to. I was kind of rude, but in a nice and kind of a nice and harmless way.
Sure, yeah.
That kind of like, you can't get mad at the guy. Clearly there's something there.
There's something going on there.
But I had so much fun. I made myself a fake name tag and everything and like walked around. I don't know. Anyway, I love that character. And so the idea of his mother being against Dungeons and Dragons and being a part of that satanic panic.
Oh, I remember that.
I thought that would be a hoot. And it was the first time I've ever dressed up as a female character that played a woman, and that was just fun to do.
And where you made the GoBot Transformers joke.
Oh yeah,
was...
I enjoyed it very much. Yeah,
that worked perfect. And you just waited for people to respond, and they got it, and it was very funny.
Yeah, I love that. Creating this whole like family of them, of these characters, and so I just really enjoy it. And then another character of mine, which is, to be honest, I have several different characters with different names, but they're all essentially the same. They're all essentially the pompous, kind of like a, I don't know, kind of like a something between John Lovitz's acting character. Like, if you were to cross him with Orson Welles, it's kind of like this guy who thinks he's the most talented, most brilliant person in the room. And everyone, even the audience, are just rubes. And he's just there to like, they're lucky to have him there to share his, acumen with the rest of them about life and culture and whatever it is he's doing. But I'll use different names for the same guy. No. It's not very creative, I guess, but I really like that character.
Is that character also the same one who writes about the imaginary characters? So you have a bit where you wrote about how the Easter Bunny is not real.
Oh yes, so that one. So the one I was just referring to, he's my murder mystery author. The one that you brought up was kind of, it was meant to be a satirical barb at Richard Dawkins. And not everyone picks up on it. Some people do, some don't. Either way, it's entertaining. I'm a religious person, which is rare in the comedy community.
Sure.
Most comedians that I know are kind of cynical, and well, I'm still cynical, but
you can be cynical
but,
and religious at the
but
same
not
time.
religious, you know. And I'm Catholic, and so I just thought the idea of someone writing a book about how the God delusion or God's not great or whatever, and it made me think, well, you know, if that's what you believe, who cares? Like, I'm not going to write a book called Unicorns Aren't Real. Right? Like, you want to believe in unicorns, go ahead, you know, if that's what you want to believe in. So you've got this like great academic mind writing about how it's silly for you to believe in God, and it's like, well, then why write the book, man? I mean, if it's that ridiculous.
Yeah.
So then I thought this would be funny to be this like kind of semi-British character who wrote a book about how believing in the Easter Bunny is a complete delusion.
It gave me a bit. You say slightly English. He gave me a bit of a Stewie Griffin vibe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just the way that you were delivering some of your lines, I was like, I'm feeling very Stewie Griffin here.
Yeah.
I really liked it.
Yeah, it's just a little barb thrown at like the super intellectual elite who want to tell people how they should think.
Yes,
that's what it was.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. And then you also is this fairly new? You also do dead comedians.
So there is a show that was I want to say it was started by there's a local comedian, DJ Dangler. When I say local, he goes all over the place.
Okay.
He writes for the Bob and Tom Show. He's very talented, and if you ever see DJ Dangler on a marquee you don't miss the show.
Gotcha.
Just don't miss it.
Gotcha.
He's great. Probably the most charismatic person I've seen on stage. Like the audience, you can't stop. As soon as he's on stage, your attention is drawn, and you won't deviate. But he is part of, and Isaac, who went to LA. They produced the show called The Dead Comics Party.
Yes.
And to them, forgive me if I'm neglecting to mention people who are really behind the scenes who make it happen. I don't know everyone's name who helps produce the show, but it's a chance for comedians to kind of homage their favorite long dead comics. So we'll do impressions. A lot of people are really good at doing impressions. They'll dress up like the guy or woman, and they do their act. And usually it's a verbatim. Sometimes it's not, but it's usually like a verbatim famous act, you know.
Really?
And we do it around Halloween time. This year it's going to be on the 27th of October. I'm in that show like every other year. I'm not in it every time because for that, I feel like my heart really has to be in it, and I want to do a really good job if I'm going to do a dead comedian. The ones that I've done, I'm proud that I did them. I think I did a okay job. This year, I wasn't sure about what to do, and I also have a conflicting gig that night.
Oh no!
And we could talk about that in a minute too.
Sure.
But I still encourage people to check out the Dead Comics Party. It's fantastic. It fills up fast. So that's
at the White Rabbit as well.
It's at the White Rabbit Cabaret. So if you see on their website that they're selling tickets, you got to get them quick because they go super fast. That show fills up real quick, and it's an absolute hoot to see, our old favorite comedians, and we're not insulting them at all. We're honoring them, by bringing them back to life.
Well, the ones that I saw that you did, I saw your Don Rickles.
Yeah,
and
now that was not a bit of his. Obviously, I improvised that. On
I
stage.
could tell some of it had to be improvised, but But I could also hear Don Rickles making some of those comments.
Yeah.
know?
Well, I tried to think of some of his insults, like he would call people hockey puck, and I don't know what that meant, but it sounded. It's a good, you know what I mean? Yeah, hockey puck. Okay, that sounds.
I think he incorporated that into Toy Story too.
Oh, maybe
as well. I mean, not too, but as well.
Right.
Yeah. And then you did Benny Hinn. Was that one of his?
Benny Hill.
Or Benny Hill, excuse
yeah.
me. So Benny Hinn is the charismatic preacher.
I used to, right. I used to watch Benny Hill with my great grandmother all the time, and because I wasn't allowed to watch that show. I mean, there's nudity. And
no, it was like, very risque.
Risque, but with my great grandmother, she'd let me watch it.
That's hilarious.
We thought it was the funniest thing in the world. But when people think of Benny Hill, they think of yakety sax, and they think of like half naked women chasing him around a park or something.
Yeah.
And it's like, but he wrote brilliant pieces and brilliant sketches and poems, and so I wanted to bring something of his to the stage that people may not have heard, which I think is a cute little story. And so that's what I did. I did Alan Sherman.
No way.
Did a lot of like, you know, he was like the Weird Al before Weird Al. I did a song of his. And then I think my favorite piece was a guy named, he called himself Lord Buckley.
Okay.
And he mostly did radio. He wasn't really around for television. But he was a very kind of a pompous kind of elite type of character. But he was also very hip. So like in the 40s, 30s, 40s, 50s, he would take classic pieces and then translate them into like 50s hipster slang. And that was his bit, right? That was his act. He would do everything. He did parts of the Bible. He did, he just did all sorts of stuff. But of course, no one's heard of him.
Yeah.
And since I have, I'm like, people have to learn who this guy is because he was brilliant. So that's what I like about Dead Comics is you can bring some obscure comedians to the front and like, you should look this person up because they were brilliant.
I don't know. Oh, no, it was the Rickles bit, but the Mitch Hedberg line had me rolling.
That was so mean.
That was so mean. But it was it was so good. I mean, a lot of that stuff I wrote right before I went on stage because I couldn't remember who was on the show, so I wanted to know who was performing that night. We almost always have a Mitch Hedberg, and so I loved Mitch Hedberg.
Oh man, brilliant! Yeah. And so it's just fun to kind of poke fun at to say that he was the king of the one-liners, and if he would have stopped at one line, he'd be alive today. It's so mean, but
so mean. You said, I was like, oh, I think I was audible.
Yeah. That's the thing in the comedy crowd too. If you get an FU when you get off stage from another comedian, it's a compliment. Like comedians are so mean to each other, and it's almost like the crueler we are to each other, it's like we're showing affection to one another. You know what I mean?
That's just the cynical side of being a comedian, right?
Yeah. I remember it was I'm not trying to toot my own horn here. It's just
right ahead.
Last Christmas, and it wasn't particularly brilliant, but it was last Christmas. I had a piece that I was not very happy with. It just wasn't. It wasn't well written, and I had written it way in advance. And I feel like I write better under the wire. So this I wrote in advance, and I'm rereading it, and I'm in the green room, and I'm like, this is just awful compared to what I'm hearing everyone else do on stage, one after another. My fellow comedian friends, my author's family, even with the author's asterisks, that go out there, and they're just killing it. And I'm like, man, this is not. I don't want to be the downer of the show. Yeah. And so I just decided to write something new in the green room, and so I wrote a piece in the style of How the Grinch Stole Christmas.
Oh, nice.
And it was an angry father who was mad about his mother-in-law coming to Christmas dinner.
Okay.
And it was anyway, and I had so much fun writing that and then going out and doing it. And then afterwards I got a lot of FUs from my, because I can't believe
you killed it then.
Can't believe you wrote that right before you went out there. And so that's a good compliment. Yeah, if a comedian insults you, it's a good thing.
Yeah. So you have a gig coming up next month, but it's in conflict with.
It's in conflict with Dead Comics, so I don't think I'll be able to do Dead Comics because I, as much as I loved the Dead Comics party and DJ, my heart will always belong to Halloween, the holiday. Halloween's a big deal for me, and it always has been. Which has inspired a few shows of mine and a few, some writings and things. So the Irvington Halloween Festival is always the Saturday before Halloween or the Saturday of Halloween. And the week leading up to that, they have events every day.
Oh, yeah.
Every day. There's a different event. They've got a vampire run, like a marathon. They've got an art auction. They have a ball. They have there's seances going on. It's all sorts of things. And the Thursday before, that's the 27th, they have what's called a night in Sleepy Hollow. You meet in the Audubon Circle. There's a fountain in the middle, and everyone sits. And kids and adults, people of all ages, have submitted scary stories or poems that they had written, and they're judged. And then the winners for each age group goes up to a microphone. Oh, hopefully there's a microphone.
Yeah,
and they read their scary story or poem for all of the folks that are there. And a lot of people bring picnic baskets and blankets, and the park, the circle's packed. And so everyone's reading their scary. It's a night of scary stories, and then they always end with kind of an abridged version of a Legend of Sleepy Hollow.
Yeah.
Because the full version would take an hour and 50 minutes to do. But
it's like the Disneyfied version.
Right.
Yeah.
So they've asked me to do that this year, to do the Legend of Sleepy Hollow. So I'm very excited.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and I might tweak it a bit and do my own kind of rewrite of it.
That would be fun.
That's what I think we're gonna do. But it's always a hoot, and I don't think this is a big spoiler or anything, but it's fun. At the end of the Legend of Sleepy Hollow, we have a headless horseman who rides around the circle.
Nice. Kind of prairie style.
Yes, exactly. And it might even be the same horseman. I don't know.
Oh, really?
I can't say. I wouldn't know, but it's a fun night, and so I'll be doing that. I've done a lot for that. One or 2 years I was on the planning committee for the festival.
Really?
I kind of inherited. It was actually the Irvington Methodist Church did an organ concert one year. It didn't draw a lot of people. It was supposed to be kind of a spooky organ concert, and I loved the idea. So I took the reins of that one because that event was gonna fall by the wayside, and I liked it because it was I didn't mention I minored in music, so
okay. You are a man of many talents here.
So I love music. I did a little composition in college. I was really excited. I love liturgical music. So I took that idea to our Catholic church at Our Lady of Lourdes, which is also in Irvington. Okay. And we've got a great big organ and plenty of space for people to sit. And we did it one year. It was a big hit. And then the next year we decided that instead of making it free, we would charge admission, but the admission would be a non-perishable food item or a piece of winter clothing.
Okay, very cool.
And then that's donated it would be donated to St. Vincent de Paul, who helps needy families during the winter and the Thanksgiving and holiday times. But the food, I think, ends up going to, we actually have the churches in Irvington, even though there's all different kinds, right, of every different types of churches, we have a community food bank that the churches kind of share. And so they all donate into the same food bank. And I think that's where that food goes now. I haven't been a part of that event in a number of years. I did it, I think, 3 years in a row, maybe, about 3. And then I stepped away, and it's grown legs.
Nice.
And I don't think people even know that I started it, and I don't care. It's I just to see it like have a life of its own. I love it.
Yeah, that's exciting.
Yeah, so it's a charity. It's some culture, and it's Halloween, and I love those things.
Yeah, kind of mixed in all of your interests there into one big event, and that's so cool to have that kind of effect on an already very large festival.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So that's exciting, and to be able to do the Sleepy Hollow. That is a what was it like to get asked to do that?
And it was a word of the mouth. I think someone was asking or asking around, does anyone know a storyteller or someone who could do this? And I think it was someone who had seen so years ago, I came up with the idea for a show called A Darkly Humorous Evening.
Yes, tell me about that.
With me, with
Yes.
Stephen Vincent Giles. It was a long time.
It's a one-man show?
It's a one-man show. One-person show. Well, technically, when it first started, I had someone helping with lights. And by helping with lights, I meant flipping a light switch on and off on a wall.
Okay.
And this was the first show. And then I had a few other people who played instruments. One of those instruments was a saw.
Oh, like you got someone to play a saw?
Yeah.
Wow.
And it was a really neat kind of thing that we just kind of slapdash together. And that was kind of, folks were like, that's good, you should do it again. So I ended up making it a fringe show for Indie Fringe.
Oh, very cool.
I did it at Indie Fringe, and it got some attention there. And that's when I think after I did it there, the White Rabbit Cabaret picked it up, and it has been kind of an annual Halloween kind of fixture.
Really?
I've done it, and I was, since I had the stage, I could expand, and I could have a set and props and lighting and other performers. I had guest performers, everything from dancers to puppeteers to whatever, to make it a more full, proper show. This year, I'm not doing it. I'm just taking a break from it this year.
Sure.
I have thought about doing a kind of a spooky Victorian Christmas show.
Oh.
I might do that before Christmas. We'll see. That's another thing that's kind of on the back burner.
That sounds a lot of fun. What would go into something like that?
Well, a friend gifted me a book of Victorian Christmas ghost stories, and I guess it was really part of the tradition in the late 1800s, early 1900s to tell scary stories around Christmas time. And there's even, I can't think of the Christmas Carol right now, the song where that will tell ghost stories and tales of the glories of Christmases long, long ago. You know that line?
Yeah.
So
that sounded familiar.
So these ghost stories were just part of Christmas time. And so I was reading through this book, and I'm like, this could be neat to bring some of these to life on stage, in some way would be really neat. I got ahead of myself. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
A Darkly Humorous Evening is not stand-up comedy. It is, and it's not
usually a one-man play.
Yeah, well, and it's not even original pieces. These are, so I can't take full credit. It is public domain.
Oh.
So these are things that have been written 100 years ago that that I think people should know about. They're terrifying, but they're funny, that they're morbid, they rhyme. It sounds like you're listening to Dr. Seuss, but it's very dark, and it kind of tickles you at the same time. I love them. I love them so much. And so whenever I discover a new one, I try to memorize it. So I have 45 minutes to an hour's worth of memorized morbid poetry.
Not a lot of people could say that.
Yeah. But as the show grew, though, I found that I should write something original, too. So I have 2 original songs that I've written that are part of the show, yeah. Well, they're talking songs.
Okay.
So I get away with talking the lyrics instead of having to sing them.
That's okay. Johnny Cash made a career out of that, so you're all good. So tell me real quick, if I don't mean to get ahead of you, but in all your years performing, who has been one of your favorite comedians to perform with or share the stage with?
Oh, wow. That's a really good question. I think with as far as stand-up comedians go, we're all pretty selfish. And I think we like the spotlight on ourselves.
Oh, sure. Well, who wouldn't?
But since I also do theater and improv and things like that, I do enjoy riffing with other comedians.
Yeah, because I was going to say, because of your background, that you've done quite a bit there. So yeah, you've probably shared the stage with a number of people.
Yeah, and well, in fact, there's one show at the Rabbit that is the White Rabbit Cabaret. That's an improv debate show.
Oh, really?
So there are 4 comedians that come out on the stage. Usually one of the comedians is a stand-up, and at least one is an improv comedian. Those are 2 very different worlds, you know.
Yes,
They're not this. They're not. They don't run in the same circles usually.
Yeah.
Anyway, there are 4 comedians come out, and you don't know what character you're going to portray until you hit the stage, and then they tell you, "Oh, you're this person." You're that person, and you find yourself, and then there's a moderator, and they ask questions, and it's a debate show. It's called Squabble. It's very funny, and you can tell sometimes there'll be pairs of comics who just really have that chemistry.
Yeah,
and they can
really
go back and forth. Yeah, it's fantastic. So for me, I'm trying to think. I had a really good time improvising again with Isaac Lanford, who's he doesn't live in Indy anymore. Sometimes he's here. There's another comedian who is local named Austin Reel. He's kind of like, if I were to describe him, he's the silent killer.
Oh, really?
But it's like if I were to say Austin Reel to someone who's not a comedian or, someone who books shows, they might not know his name, but he's pretty fantastic. I really admire the way he writes, and his use of just his word economy is just spot on aces. I think he's one of the best writers in our local scene here. But we did an improv bit at least once together, and it just was it was at Authors, and even with the Authors, but it was really comfortable. It was easy, and it was just the audience liked it a lot, and I could tell that it was just so easy. It didn't even feel like work or comedy. It was So that was probably the most fun. If I had to pick
Sure.
one person.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's really neat. Yeah, you never know who. You only start hearing about comics talking about other comics, seemingly, when someone has died,
Yeah.
And not that they don't respect other comics, but I mean, the competition is seemingly very stiff.
Or they'll drop names. So when you're asking me who I'd like to improv with, well, have I worked with with famous comedians, like big famous comedians who are making the big bucks and stuff? Sure. But I didn't have a particularly nice time. I mean, there are a few comedians that I opened for that were just, I thought, really rude people, and it's strange to meet your heroes. Like growing up, I would admire them, and growing up in like the late I was glued to Comedy Central in the late '80s, early '90s.
I remember watching comic strip live all the time.
Oh yeah, and so now as an adult, I'm in my 40s now, but being in my late 30s, early 40s, and I would open for these guys or gals, and you meet them and you get to know them, and it's like, oh, you're awful. What? You're just a terrible, terrible person.
So maybe their bit isn't too far from true.
I mean, some of them will surprise you, though. Some of them are some of them are amazingly modest and kind.
Yeah.
And that's always really refreshing. But when you were asking me that question, I'm like, I want to name a local comedian because I feel like we just don't. Indianapolis has so much talent. There's so much here, and it's just I think some people don't know to look for it. I think people look to things like Netflix or whatever it is they're looking at, tickets to Murat, and it's like, no, take a look at who's playing at Crackers downtown. Crackers Comedy Club is where I got started. They were the first comedy club to make me a headliner. I'm very grateful to Crackers because they really helped my comedy career grow. Take a look and see who's playing at Helium Comedy Club. Maybe not in the big room, but the little room.
Yeah.
I call it the little room, but it's just it's the upstairs room, because they'll often have someone from Indiana or a surrounding, in the area, surrounding states performing there. Brilliant brilliant comedians, and it's just I just feel like people don't know any better.
Yeah.
You just got to get out there.
Yeah. Well, I need to get them on this show. That's,
Yeah.
I want to show off what Indianapolis has to offer on all fronts. And when the opportunity to have a comedian on the show it's like I hadn't even thought of that, but I was like, yes, I would love that. And to really kind of dive into that field is, I think, would be fantastic, because again, you're learning about all these scenes that, you know, Indianapolis, like you said, has a ton of talent, and a lot of people just don't know it. Mm-hmm. So it's unearthing this talent so that you're like, hey, Indianapolis has a lot to offer.
I think it can, sometimes folks can wind up at a sports bar, you want to watch a ball game, mm-hmm. and suddenly you find out that it's open mic night. And that can ruin your time because you're trying to watch a ball game and everyone's telling you to be quiet for the performers. And the performers they're either people like me who are trying out brand new material, which is hard because it's embarrassing. It's usually not very funny. You have to like figure out where the funny is. And that's not particularly entertaining, to be honest. I mean, sometimes a comedian will be at an open mic and they'll just be gold. You know, it's just brilliant. A lot of times it's people who are doing comedy for the first time. So I know that open mic nights can put a bad taste in people's mouths because they're like, oh, is that what it's like? Like, I've seen local comedians. Like, no, you haven't. You've been to the workshop. That's our gym where we work mm-hmm. out. That's not where we perform.
Yeah.
You know, that's where you go, and you know, when you're in a band, you can practice and you know when the song's ready. Mm-hmm. But when you're a comedian, the only way to find out if it's funny or not is to do it in front of an audience.
Yeah, and that's got to be so scary.
So sometimes it doesn't work, and it's like, man, it's just silence, no laughs, and like, why didn't it work? And sometimes you'll find all you have to do is like move one word to a different spot, or like wait 2 seconds after that word, and like it's a real kind of blend of art and science that I really enjoy it. But I just want people to think I've seen the comedy scene, basing it off of open mics. Open mics are great. We need them to practice, but see a proper show. Like, see a show that you have to pay admission for.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Absolutely. I would encourage anybody and everybody to do that. I haven't checked out enough comedians in Indianapolis or been to enough comedy clubs because it's a little bit harder for me to get out as a parent of 5.
Wow.
Yeah, and I'm not Catholic. But yeah, but those are. I remember going to a comedy set one time, and it was a blast. It was an absolute blast. Yeah. So I encourage people to check out more than just if you've sat through an open mic night. Go to a club. Go to Crackers. Go to Morty's. Go to Helium. Check out these places. Check out your local comedians. Stephen, is there anything that I've missed that you want to plug or that you want to mention?
You know, I'm thinking, I can't think of anything. I think I just wanted to let you know that An Evening with the Authors is always on, well, for now, it is on the first Thursday of the month. So the first Thursday of every month, it is at White Rabbit Cabaret. And I'm not on it every single time, but that doesn't mean don't go. You should absolutely go. It's a brilliant show.
Yes.
And it's I love it.
It's your baby.
It really is my baby. I love it. And maybe keep an ear out or an eye out for, who knows, a spooky Victorian Christmas might be coming this year. I don't know. I'm not gonna hold you to it, but it sounds like it's a lot of fun. Yeah, I think I'll know by the end of October. You know, I'll know by Halloween whether or not I'm going to do it.
That sounds great. And if you guys have liked what you've heard today, I've been recording this at the Engine Room Recording Company, and it's located in Broad Ripple Village, just north of downtown Indianapolis, and it specializes in making your projects go. Podcasters, bands, audio bookers, rappers, singers, songwriters, and everyone in between. The Engine Room Recording Company has the engineers and the equipment and the environment to fuel your projects. Check out Broad Ripple's recording studio by visiting for more information on their services, artists they've recorded, and gear they have at engineroomrecordingcompany.com, and be sure to visit their Instagram page by searching at Engine Room Recording Company. Stephen Vincent Giles, comedian, character actor, storyteller, everything extraordinaire.
Hey, thanks.
Thank you for being on the show
It
today.
was a pleasure. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And this has been Josh Gillespie for Stephen Vincent Giles. Thank you for tuning in. Well, my next guest will be on the live stream. It will be Ian Mast. And I'm looking forward to that. You guys should be looking forward to that too. We'll see you soon.